Alright, welcome back to the channel, or welcome if you're new. So today I've got a small update and a great game for you to enjoy. Small update to the Bullsazat deck is that for now at least I've removed the Doughty Voidwalker in favor of Paradise Mantle. I feel like Paradise Mantle's a card that's been in and out of the deck multiple times, as has Doughty as a matter of fact. And the main reason for making this change is that the easiest way for this deck to lose is for it to stumble in the early game. So anything that can smooth that out, particularly when it functions in the form of acceleration, is welcome for the deck. And Paradise Mantle, just being able to go turn one Rog, land, Paradise Mantle, equip the Mantle, pass, and basically play a first turn Bird of Paradise, I suppose, hence the name. But being able to do that off a 0-drop, so it literally feels like a Bird of Paradise where you've only spent 1 mana to get the effect, is really valuable. But it's also really good because, specifically here, because we have so many colorless mana sources. You know, we've got Saga and Ancient Tomb, and we've got City of Traders and Wasteland and Strip Mine and Dust Bowl and Rishadan's Port, and all these mana sources are colorless, Westvale Abbey, and so on and so forth. So we occasionally can just get in a situation where it's not the mana ramp that's as important from the Paradise Mantle, but it's the mana fixing, so color fixing specifically. And then also there are some really good 3-mana cards we'd love to play on turn 2 that the number of those is increased. Fable of the Mirror Breaker, Lelia, and so forth, and it's really nice to be able to hit those a turn early and get things going, get ahead of the game. So why Doughty Voidwalker? The answer is only because I couldn't find another card to cut. I tried cutting Feed the Swarm and ended up regretting it. One of the reasons to continue to play Feed the Swarm is just the existence of Urza's Saga. There's basically always an enchantment in everyone's deck, or should be, that you can kill with it, and being able to sinkhole that thing before it starts producing robots and soul rings and stuff is pretty important, if possible. And since we can tutor for cards fairly easily in this deck, or just find them through consistent drawing, having access to that ability where we otherwise wouldn't is pretty valuable. So it really was more like a case of what if I'm not going to pull Feed the Swarm, then what would I pull for the Doughty? And I can't really seem to identify a card that is worth replacing. Doughty's really strong. Doughty Voidwalker's really strong. And I suppose if I find an underperformer, then I'll probably swap it back in for whatever that card might be. But up till, like, throughout now, it's been working really well. In the meantime, excuse me. So the deck that I've got, sorry, the game that I've got to show you, sorry, I'm hearing my son shouting at the dog in the background, it's distracting me, is this excellent game I was playing. The other day you can see I played the Vintage, and I think I made a video on that, and then I've been playing Bullsazat since then, and the deck hasn't lost in the last, 10, 15 games, or what is that, 12 games, something like that here, as its tendency is, against some really strong opponents too. But the game that I've got in particular was just an absolute nail-biter against Rainbow Unicorn, and I was super pleased that the replay worked because, boy, this game was quite the interesting one. And I think what I want to do is I want to turn off, I want to hide the chat so that we can just focus on the game, and I'll hide the game log as well, and we'll just get going. So let's see if we can get things started here. Okay, so I'm playing against Rainbow Unicorn, who's running Eligith Crossroads Augur, which turns scrying into card drawing, and Thrasios Triton Hero, who can scry and then draw. So if you use these in together, if you get both of them out, then you get to tap 4 mana and draw 2 cards. Or if one of them's a land, you get to just sneak it into play and draw a card, which is even better than drawing 2 cards. So, but for all intents and purposes, this is a a 2-card combo that turns this into a double jammed 8 tome with a little bit of mana ramp attached. Pretty good. I do not think this is... I think this deck could be better, and I think that the commander is the problem here. I think this commander is just absolutely nowhere near as good as Tevesh. I would replace this Elgith with Tevesh, which would, I think, make the deck far more competitive. Getting access to black is huge. You get all the amazing black cards available to you, and you also get a commander who greatly rewards you for having a early start with a Jewel Lotus, which is one of the reasons Tevesh is so good. And you give up very little. This is without Thrasios or some other scry mechanics, this is just a 5/6 partner. A 5/6 flyer. Without anything else, this is just a 5 mana card that wins the game. It also costs 1 less mana, so I do recommend that if you happen to be watching Rainbow Unicorn, unless you have a very specific reason, like for example you just don't like Tevesh and you're opposed to playing it, or you're just not interested, then, you know, rock on. But otherwise, I would say Thrasios Tevesh is probably a better combination. But that said, my opponent gives me a very challenging game. So let's get started on that. You can see I have a very acceptable hand. There's nothing wrong with it. There's nothing too great about it, but it does have, you know, him, early removal, strong disruption card against blue, some ramp. It's kind of everything you want to see in a hand. So my opponent leads off with a mulligan to 5 and then turn 1 island. So I'm thinking, I didn't think this was actually going to be a particularly difficult game, but I never take, you know, like, I know Rainbow Unicorn's a strong player, so I don't, you know, take that opponent for granted here. And here I make a, anyway, so going to give it my best, but I felt like, you know, I have a huge edge, obviously, off the double mulligan. And I felt like here, my opponent plays Thrasios, and I deadly rollicked it, and the reason I did is because I was concerned about the free counterspell that the commander gives you. Excuse me, the free negate, because I'd really like to him my opponent, which should probably be a game win. My opponent's down to 4 cards and I take 2, I might take a mana source or whatever. So I figured I'll just exile that to take away the possibility of the free counter. However, this is kind of ambitious, and you'll see that I ended up kind of paying for, like, this isn't a threat until he gets to 4 mana, so I could always rollick it later, other than that, the existence of that card. So perhaps this was an error. You'll see how much it hurts later. So with a Soul Ring off the top, I'm pumped, right? I'm going to go land, Soul Ring, Talisman, him, is what I'm thinking. But my opponent forced the negations with an offer you can't refuse. This is a card that, while it can, incidentally, while it can save you from a card like a turn 1 Tevesh, giving your opponent 2 treasures seems just like a horrifically high price to pay. Unless you're just winning the game on the spot, it seems absolutely terrible. Whenever I play against this card, I feel like the best use of it is to exile it to force a negation. So I was quite sad to see that happen. I would love for this card to counter something and give me some treasures, but here we are. Opponent's down to 2 cards in hand though, so like still I'm in great shape. I mean, the him hasn't even happened yet, right? So my opponent misses a land drop, and I'm thinking, I was weighing some considerations here. I want to him my opponent and take 2/3 of their hand away, but I'm also balancing that against the fact that if my opponent has a mana drain, what will happen? But because their big guy is 6 mana and does nothing, even if my opponent mana drains, they get 2 mana, so they get a total of 4. They might play Thrasios, and I could draw a land and just kill it with Liliana, or they might play like Ancient Tomb big thing, and same scenario. So I felt like it was totally correct to him here, but I did think about how I wanted to, you know, whether or not I wanted to risk giving my opponent mana drain mana, and so this is what takes place. I go for the him, and unfortunately for me, it's just Flusterstormed. So I don't like having, I mean, I didn't get 2 cards, I got 1, but sure, might have been nicer if I would have ran out like Grim Monolith and Talisman or something like that. And then for my opponent's turn, he rips a land off the top and slams Sveljun of Sea and Sky. And this is what an insane card. Has indestructible if you control 2 other merfolk. It's a 3/4 for 3 mana, which is huge. And whenever it attacks, you draw a card. And other merfolk you control have ward 1. So I just want to compare this to a card that won. I just want to bring up, like, the power creep is just unbelievable. So this card here, let's see if I've got one. And if not, I'll go quantity 0 and bring it up. Okay, I don't actually own one, and not sure why I would, but this card that I'm about to show you, and you surely have figured out what it is, but this card from Weatherlight won Pro Tour. This card was a beast. Sorry, it was a snake. This card was an absolute monster, though. It completely dominated back in the day, and I just want you to compare this card that was just totally nuts and won like game after game after game for mono blue to the card that I now have to deal with in this game against my opponent. So this is a 3 mana 1/3 who has to be unblocked and deals no damage, and then for all of that you get to draw a card, right? You may draw a card. So a 1/3 that has to be unblocked and deals no damage after it's unblocked. And what I'm facing down is a 3/4 who can get indestructible, can protect other creatures, always draws a card, always deals damage, and instead of being a 1/3 is a 3/4. What insane power creep this is. This is just unbelievable to me. I'd never seen this card before, but what a ridiculous upgrade. But you know, okay, fine. So in order to try to deal with this card, which I'm clearly going to struggle to deal with because I missed a land drop and can't slam Liliana and kill it, is that I decided that I'm going to go with the Winter Orb plan. I don't love Winter Orb against somebody drawing multiple cards in the sense that they should be hitting their land drops, and that's an unfortunate scenario for the Orb. On the flip side, against somebody who has a lot of cards, you need to attack their mana. If you can't stop their cards, stop their mana. If you can't stop their mana, stop their cards. So I cannot stop my opponent from drawing cards here, not yet. So I'm going to attack his mana. So this is the reason for the Orb here. My opponent's going to swing in, immediately draws a card, and then, you know, hits. Misses a land drop, which is important. So I'm going to go ahead and Imperial Seal here because next turn I really want to play Liliana. So I'm going for a card that should make it a lot easier for me to do that. I need to get this engine off the board fast. My opponent plays a fetch land here and then makes a strange play. Does not crack it. And because they don't crack it, it changes the direction that I plan to go with the next turn. So I was going to Liliana here and back it up with a deflecting swap, but I decide to pass in order to flash out Opposition Agent. My opponent has Force of Will, which gets redirected to the SWAT. The agent sticks. And now what I can do is I take my opponent's island, and on the next turn I can play it along with this and this untapping, and I'll still have the 3 mana for Liliana. So I do have to give my opponent an extra card here, but I took a land away from them and gave myself an extra play, and I have a creature in play that's, you know, pretty frustrating at times. So I felt like this was probably all right. So I play out my island here, I go for it, and unfortunately my opponent has a counterspell. I'm down to 2 cards in hand at this point. So if you noticed, I don't know if you're seeing a pattern there, but this is basically like a pure counter deck. Plays Field of the Dead and passes. I draw a Strip Mine, which is huge, and manage to resolve a Crucible, which is even bigger. And my opponent forced with Azami over there. So we'll go ahead and close the Exile Zone. Alright, so I'm going to Strip Mine, replay Strip Mine again. And each time, so I Strip Mine, my opponent floats mana. I replay Strip Mine and declare my attack step. It empties their pool. I Strip Mine them again. They float mana. I enter my, that was the beginning of combat. I enter my declaration of attackers, which empties their pool, and swing in with the Opposition Agent. Alright, I'm going to Strip Mine here again and swing. And my opponent does something that I think was a huge mistake. Huge mistake, unless they have a reason to do this. So my opponent flashes out Mystic Snake in order to block and kill the agent. So unless my opponent has something like, I don't know, Natural Order or Mystic Tutor or something that they intend to actually fetch with, maybe they have a hand of mostly fetches, this is a terrible idea in my view. And the reason this is a terrible idea for my opponent, again, in my opinion, is because what they've done is they've destroyed, they've quadruple sinkholed themselves in order to kill a 3/2 while they're facing down a Strip Mine Crucible. So they just destroyed 4 lands to kill this thing. So imagine if this card just didn't, instead of being Mystic Snake, imagine if this card just said blue, blue, green 1, sacrifice 4 lands, destroy target opposition agent. Like, think about how garbage that would be, right? You would never in a million years play that card, but my opponent just played that card. So, excellent. And I'm still, by the way, getting beat down with this thing, and my opponent's still drawing multiple cards per turn. So now I'm going to try and pact on my turn and see if I can find myself a solution to this darn 3/4, and I do. Having to, unfortunately, exile... I had to exile Sulphur Springs, Arid Mesa, Abrade, City, Brass, City of Traders by force, and Call of the Ring, and then I finally find the Rampage. I could have played it on my opponent's turn, but I decided I would play it there, which I probably could have waited on. But at any rate, my opponent runs out a taps for green and decides against, and then smashes in and draws yet another card, takes me to 11, has 6 cards in hand now. So for my turn, I'm going to carefully, sequence my turn. I'm going to Strip Mine first. Opponent floats green. Once again, we're going to go into the combat phase and empty that. And then I'm going to attempt to Rampage my opponent. And even though I'm at 11 life, I'm going to take the damage off of this because 1 life is not worth sinkholing myself over here. So I take the damage here and I go for it. And my opponent has Disrupting Shoal, exiling Jacob Hauken Inspector, which is an interesting card. But basically yet another free counterspell. So I am getting free counterspell. Again, with a card drawing engine, it's just brutal. Alright, for his turn, in comes the 3/4 that is just making this game insanely hard or almost unwinnable. My opponent then plays a Soul Ring. If not for the Winter Orb, obviously this would be completely unwinnable. I play a Strip Mine and pass. And then I think on it and decide I'm going to go for Tevish, which sticks. And I go ahead and make some thralls. So now my opponent ponders and attacks, but I can now chump, even though I'm at 6 life. And my opponent still gets to draw cards, blocking or not. But now, while they do get to draw cards, I've got a bit of a problem for them, and I'm carefully working around their mana to try to make it so that, once again, they have cards, but they don't have mana to play those cards, and I'm trying to get them to where they're going to be discarding. They do, in fact, discard a Traverse. Pre-combat, I play Strip Mine, and then slow things down. Inquisition my opponent, and we see the following. We see Sapphire Medallion, Disallow, Island, Annul, Regrowth Foil, and Veil of Summer. So my opponent did have available a Flooded Strand, but I had an untapped Strip Mine. So they could have played Flooded Strand and then made to cast the Veil, and it would have resolved, and they would have drawn a card and countered the Inquisition. And that would have also meant that I couldn't Strip Mine this unless I wanted to strip it while it was while in response to the Veil. But that's exactly what I would have done. I would have Strip Mined it in response to the Veil, and then they wouldn't have access to green mana next turn. So rather than do that, they allow the Veil of Summer to get taken from their hand. Perhaps they were hoping I would take another card. And then I go ahead and just Strip Mine their Field of the Dead anyway after seeing what's going on in their hand. So the main thing I have to keep track of is that they have a Disallow, which is a Stifle for 3 mana. Foil, which is another free counterspell. Annul, which counters at 1 mana. Regrowth, not super significant. An Island and a Sapphire Medallion. So I have to keep all those things in mind. Mainly Foil and Disallow being the big ones. Excuse me. I suppose Annul is also relevant because it's easy to use from here. But I am, of course, I have been playing blue control for 30 years, so over the course of this game, I am playing against my opponent in the ways that I know would be the most effective way to play against me if I were sitting in my opponent's seat. And it's paying off, right? Carefully sequencing things, strip mining in the correct order, and so on and so forth. Even though I'm at 6 life and my opponent's drawing 2 cards per turn, I'm feeling pretty good about the situation. And they have a free counter spell. I'm still feeling pretty good about the situation. Alright, so this time I'm going to trump with Rog because I'm intending to ultimate Tevish. And if I'm going to ultimate Tevish, I might as well get Rog. And then I might as well get Rog out of the command zone for free, since that's what Tevish does. And at this point, then my opponent plays Mox Amber. So we can check this off. So my opponent's hand is Mox... Sorry, the disallow that I really need to deal with. They played an island, so if they don't have another island, this foil is no longer on board. So there's a chance of that. And one unknown. So I'm going to go ahead and this turn is really key. Drawing Dark Ritual is wonderful there. Of course, I know about the disallow, so I'm going to attempt to waste this. If they disallow it, great. If they don't, fine. Either way, let's get them off counter magic for the K command. More importantly, let's get them off the stifle effect so that I can ultimate Tevish, take both of their commanders, get my commander back, both of my commanders back, immediately draw 3 more cards, and then from there, you know, the game is basically over. And of course, Rainbow Unicorn is knowledgeable enough to understand what a losing board state looks like, and at this point, and goes ahead and rightly concedes. But this was just an insane game. I was so behind for most of this game due to the free counters stealing a ton of tempo, and the cost of it being completely covered by this thing. Incidentally, I suspect that if you were going to play mono blue, this might be the new mono blue commander of choice. I don't know for sure. I haven't thought about it too hard, but it's certainly one of the cards that I would consider. And either way, if you're playing, imagine this card in like Edric. This would be so good. Either way, like I was saying, I imagine this card will make the cut in quite a few blue decks, Merfolk or not, just because it's really, really gnarly, extremely strong draw engine. Easy to kill if you can single target it. Otherwise, if you have 2 Merfolk, extremely hard to kill, and easy to kill if you can single target it with the right cards, like Angerous Rampage and so forth. Not so easy to kill if you have to kill it with like Shatterskull Smashing or Lightning Bolt or whatever, so it's got a lot of resilience to quite a bit of the removal in the format. But anyway, this was a really enjoyable game, and I just was looking forward to sharing that with you because how extremely close that game ultimately ended up being. And it's always fun to talk about old school and power creep. And if you ever want to look up the Ophidian deck, you'll see a deck with forbids and foils and a bunch of other fun stuff that plays out very similarly to the deck we just faced, where it's a lot of free counter spells backed up with a card drawing engine that just holds the opponent in place and then eventually beats them down and wins. Although in that deck, because Ophidian couldn't deal damage, it actually killed with man lands, but or your opponent just conceded. Anyway, but that's all I've got for now. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you next time.